So good morning, Dhamma friends. Today I am hoping to um, talk about a topic that we were discussing in another Dhamma group, the Bodhimagga UK group. It is a group of very lovely people residing in the UK and um, having discussions on Dhamma things so that they can progress better on the path. So I happen to do a short talk there about the first noble truth, Dukkha Satya. And in that, I was going through a few things about how the Buddha saw Dukkha Satya in life. And I ended with one thing, which was what Venerable Ajahn Chah wrote to Venerable Ajahn Sumedho. So Venerable Ajahn Sumedho was building a monastery in the UK as per the request of Venerable Ajahn Chah. So there were, after Venerable Ajahn Chah visited the UK, there was a lot of requests to have a monastery there and to share the forest tradition of meditation. And Ajahn Sumedho went there on the request of Venerable Ajahn Chah. So Ajahn Sumedho, being a US national, probably had the better fit to go and engage in some activity like that. And also out of Ajahn Chah's students, he is considered the leading student in terms of his understanding of the Dhamma. So he seemed like the most appropriate person to do that in the UK. And Venerable Ajahn Chah, obviously understanding how hard it must be, because Venerable Ajahn Chah himself has built a couple of monasteries. So he knows, I mean, monks by definition are people who do not have an income. And without an income, to build a monastery means you need to you need even more skill than a normal layman who will be building their house. So Venerable Ajahn Chah wrote a very brief letter to Venerable Sumedho, which of course, my understanding is Venerable Ajahn Chah never learned English, but all the Western monks who came to study the teaching under Venerable Ajahn Chah either had a translator or they learned a bit of Thai language. I think it was a combination of both. So a Western monk in Thailand, in the forest monastery with Ajahn Chah, wrote this and said that the teacher wants you to know. And this is what it said. It said, Ajahn Sumedho, whenever you have feelings of love or hate for anything whatsoever, these will be your aids and partners in building parami. The Buddha Dhamma is not to be found in moving forwards, nor in moving backwards, nor in standing still. This Sumedho is your place of non-abiding. Okay? So I really love that last line. The Buddha Dhamma is not to be found in moving forwards, nor in moving backwards, nor in standing still. This is your place of non-abiding. Now, I found this in the book called Small Boat, Great Mountain by Venerable Ajahn Amaro. So all these are of course students of Ajahn Chah, and we must never forget that everybody, including ourselves, are getting inspired by the original teacher, the Buddha himself. But we refer to these teachers because in the absence of the Buddha, who explained things with such simplicity, really deep concepts were explained with metaphors and simplicity, where he became known as a absolutely fantastic teacher for this reason. In the absence of that, Venerable Ajahn Chah and the student lineage that he has are doing that for us. So, and when we are referring to it, we say therefore that Venerable Ajahn Chah said this, and Ajahn Sumedho said that, Ajahn Brahm said this, but underlying all of that is, of course, the Buddha himself, which we must gratefully acknowledge, as much as we are gratefully acknowledging these amazing, marvelous teachers of the present day. And if you take the Vedanupassana that I teach and practice in these sessions, which we call, it's the Goenkaji technique. Goenkaji himself would say that Vipassana was introduced to the world by the Buddha, and it was practiced in India 2,600 years ago very extensively. And at the time Goenkaji introduced it, it had died and there was no memory or nothing was left. And he revived it to the world. And that is why we refer to it as the Goenkaji technique, because he brought it back. And if he didn't do that, we today, you and I, will not have access to it. So that is the gratitude we offer these amazing people when we refer to them as the teacher. So now this whole thing about if you can't go forward, can't go backward, and cannot stand still, because the moment you say you can't go forward and you can't go backward, this is something we refer to always, like don't go into your past, it's done. Don't go into the future, nobody can foretell the future. Stay in the present moment. And here we are going one step forward and saying, don't stay in the present moment also. And then the question is, so if you can't do either of those, where can you go? So when this question is asked from audiences, it's interesting that sometimes people say, why don't you go up or sideways, right? And then the answer is no. So the answer lies in how we constrain ourselves. As long as we see ourselves as a person, as an entity, as the me, myself, I, we constrain ourselves to time and space. And everything we make sense of is from time and space. So when we say go somewhere, we mean going from here to there. So in the mind, when we say don't go to the past, it is we have constructed time and space. So we are here now. Therefore, there is a past that I can go to. And I'm here now, and therefore there is a future that I can go to in my mind. It's a construction. And there's time in it as well. So I'm here now in 2023, and my past is from the time I was born up to now. And my future is from now until the time I die, someday in the future. So this is how we are living in space and time, based on the construct of me, myself, I. Now, the place of non-abiding cannot be reached when you are constrained within these constraints. It can be reached only when you come out of these constraints. So there are three constraints here. So one is the whole self-image. There is a person, there is me. The moment you come out of it, time and space has no meaning. Because this whole idea of time and space came because there is me. And then only you can be in this place of non-abiding. So in this book, Small Boat, Great Mountain, Ajahn Amaro goes on to explain how Ajahn Chah explained this to him. And in the book itself, he says that Ajahn Chah told his students, I didn't understand this until my teacher, Ajahn Mun, explained this to me. So what did his teacher explain? His teacher explained this, the mind and its objects. And this note, I typed it out for my friends in Bodhi Mother. So I will post it in the group as well, so that you can read it as well. So the mind has two separate qualities. This is what Ajahn Mun explained to Ajahn Chah. And this was the piece that Ajahn Chah didn't have with him until then. And his entire teaching is based on these three lines. First line is the mind has two separate qualities. Second line is the knowing mind, awareness, is one of the qualities. Third line is objects of knowing, the mind objects, is the second quality. So if you think of a theory to base your practice on, this is it. The mind has two separate qualities. First is the knowing mind, the awareness. This awareness is still, it's quiet, it's spacious. And then there are the mind objects. Sights you see, sounds you hear, smells you feel, tastes you feel, touch sensations. And then there are the thoughts and emotions that flow through. All of these things are flowing through that knowing mind. And the knowing mind is awareness. So as these things flow through, there is awareness that these are flowing through. Now, what happens normally to laymen or people who are not on the path, and here what I mean by the path is the whole Sowan, Sakadagami, Anagami, Arihat path, where they are firmly established on the path and the end result is guaranteed. For people who are not there, they usually do not know about these two separate qualities. And therefore they mix the two up, causing confusion and suffering. And people who have some understanding of this are these people who are either Sowan, Sakurdagami, Anagami, Arihat. Now it's a very difficult thing to say because you can't gauge it. So if somebody asks, okay, so now that you are telling me this, am I Sowan? I don't know. And I think we shouldn't care either because those are just labels also, end of the day. What is important is for us to practice and ask ourselves, has my confusion, has my suffering reduced as a result, even minuscule? That is the question to ask. And if your confusion and your suffering is reducing gradually, over a period of time, it will completely disappear. And then you don't need labels anymore. That is all we need to think about. So how does this work? So there are metaphors that are described in the book, Small Boat, Great Mountain. So the first one is the mirror. So a mirror is a beautifully pure, unembellished, uncorrupted thing where it has objects as images appearing on it. Now, the untrained mind will label those objects as beautiful or ugly. But for the mirror, it doesn't matter whether image is beautiful or ugly because number one, the mirror doesn't label it. Number two, it's just an image for the mirror. And the mirror doesn't get bored. Even when there's nothing to be reflected, it is still in its original state. And when there's something to be reflected, it is still in its original state. And the original state is it's unembellished, uncorrupted by whatever that gets reflected on it. Okay, so that's the mirror. And you can see how those two qualities, the knowing mind is the mirror. Those images that get reflected are the things that are flowing through the knowing mind. And oil and water, I really love this example of oil and water. The knowing mind is like the oil, and the sense objects that flow through are like the water. And because, so think of the oil and the water in a bottle. Sorry, I haven't mentioned it here in the document. Think of oil and water in a bottle, where the oil is like the knowing mind and the water is the sense objects, sense impressions that are flowing through. And because our life is usually very busy and turbulent, these two get shaken up together. And thus it appears like they are one. So the mind that knows and the sense objects appear like one. This is where we get it confused, where the knowing mind, this awareness, is misunderstood like I, me, myself, I. And those sense objects that's flowing through get misunderstood as these are mine. So there's I, and then there are things that are flowing through which are mine. So obviously then you mix the two up and think, okay, I am seeing, I am hearing, I am tasting. And if you let the system calm down, then the oil and water separate naturally. This is the nature of the two. They separate. The nature of the two is they are not mixed up. They don't get mixed up. It just appears mixed up. They don't get mixed up. They will separate themselves out if we let them, if we stand out of the way. And I thought that's a beautiful metaphor. Okay. The next metaphor is about the still flowing water. So Ajhan once asked his audience, have you seen still water? So the audience is used to quote unquote strange questions by the masters. So they're like, yes, Ajhan, we have. And the second question was, have you seen flowing water? Yes, of course we have. All right, friends, then the third question is, have you seen still flowing water? Now that is where people get flummoxed because when I read this, I thought maybe in one of those nature documentaries I have seen where there's ice on the surface, but water is flowing underneath. That is possibly one, but then that is not water. It's a different form of thing. But still flowing water in this part of the world probably is something that we can't think of from a context. So he goes on to describe that the knowing mind is what is still, and the sense impressions, it's what is flowing. So the mind's nature, it is still, yet it is flowing, it is flowing, it is still. So in this document, I have therefore colored in blue and purple to help you distinct, blue being the things referring to the knowing mind, and purple being the things that refer to the flowing nature of the mind or the sense impressions. So the word chitta can be used to refer to the knowing mind, awareness, because chitta itself is totally still. It has no movement. It is not related to all that arises and passes. It is silent and it's spacious. And the metaphor that I used, which is something I heard in a talk, probably Ajahn Brahm, is this hall, HALL, this hall where there are open doors and windows, and the breeze can come in and go out as it pleases. And sometimes perhaps a lizard or something else might come in. And in our living room hall, we have had a bird mistakenly fly in, and when left alone, the bird flies out after it takes a little bit of time, so the bird gets totally disoriented. It absolutely didn't mean to come in here. And then it sees the light and the breeze, it feels the breeze outside, and that is where its natural habitat is, and it flies out. So, a venerable, I forget who it is, used this example of a lizard coming into your living room when the doors and windows are open. And he beautifully described the scenario where imagine that you get highly agitated and excited and take a broom and you try to chase the lizard away. And in the process, you are engaging with the lizard, and the lizard gets scared, obviously. and even more agitated than you, and runs away and hides somewhere, probably under your couch. And for days you can't find him. And which means now there's a lizard in your living room. And that is what happens when we forget the quality of the mind and we start engaging with things and they stay with us. So it is yet another metaphor that we can think about. And Ajahn Chah, in one place, he in fact has a book titled A Still Forest Pool, where he's also referring to this. He said, if you really still your mind, it becomes so still and clear, like a pool in the forest. And as you just sit and observe, you will find animals come to drink water. And sometimes you will find really strange beings that you have never seen before also come to drink water. And I believe he was referring to the stillness of samadhi and how you start really seeing through your vipassana the various nature of the things that's flowing through the mind. Because we have probably seen at a very mundane level what is flowing through the mind. And at a super mundane level, there must be many, many more. And that's what he's referring to, I think, by saying that there will be various animals and things that you have never ever seen in your life, really beautiful, really, really beautiful and different, that you have never seen before, that come to drink water. So it's a beautiful combination of, so a lot of times people ask, what do we need? Do we need samatha or vidarshana? And the answer always in the Ajahn Chah lineage has been, why are you even labeling these things? Because it's the two sides of the same coin. To still your mind, to quiet your mind, you need samatha. And then to see the flowing nature of the mind, you need vipassana, you need both. And even when you are practicing anapanasati with the intent of samatha, vipassana takes place there because you start being aware of things that are flowing. So for example, when your mind wanders away, you are aware. And you bring back the concentration or the attention to the breath because you want to build on the stillness. But when the mind flowed, you were aware. So it's both actually. You can't separate the two. It is the both are the two sides of the same coin. So the still flowing water. Mind, so the chitta is the word the Buddha used to describe the first qualities. I said there were two qualities of the mind. The first quality is the knowing mind. So Buddha used the word chitta to describe this, and that is totally still, no movement, not related to anything that rises and passes away. It's silent and spacious. And in many books, I find this referred to as the original mind, like the mirror, unembellished, not corrupted. So then sense impressions start arising based on what you are seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. And based on those, you start thinking. And even when those are not there, your thoughts and emotions are coming through. And based on a thought and emotion that comes, you start thinking. So things start to flow through it. And problems arise because the clarity of the mind gets entangled with these sense impressions. What does the mind do? Chases the delightful, repels the painful, runs away from the painful. It's a full-time job. And ever since I read about this, one thing that has been clear to me is chasing the delightful and running away from the painful for us normal humans is a full-time job. That's what we do from the morning when we wake up. We are like, time for some breakfast. Let me have a cup of tea, right? Or let me go to the washroom. It's all about, there is some pressure getting built up in the mind saying, I want this and I want that. And life is about relieving those pressures. So hunger builds up, we eat. You want to remove waste from your body, your pressure builds up, you go and remove them. You want to earn a living, a pressure builds up on that, you go and earn a living. You are tired and pressure builds up that you need to rest, so you take some rest. It's all about relieving the pressures that are building up. And the pressure got built up because of those sense impressions that come. And then in order to relieve it, you do things, and then further sense impressions get built. And as you're doing that, there's judgment about, I like this, I don't like this is good, this is bad, this is right, this is wrong. Right. So in order to relieve the pressure of thirst, you can drink water, you can drink a fizzy drink, you can drink alcohol, and whatever you are doing, thoughts will come. With water, probably the thought will come that, this is boring. Maybe you don't think about it, but that's the kind of the feeling. This is boring. Isn't there something better that I can drink? With a fizzy drink, while it is not boring, but comes the guilt of this is not good for me. And with alcohol, is probably more extreme feelings of this is nice, but not good. And so all of those things is the label, the judgment, where even in that moment, you are not really enjoying it, even though you think you are enjoying it. So this is because we are engaging with these things. And as a result, we are struggling, we feel alienated, we feel miserable. And in this book, Ajhan Amaro describes his life before he became a monk, and where he was chasing all the sensual pleasures in the world, and how this place of non-abiding just made sense to him, because he said even as a child, as a teenager, he felt very stifled with all the rules and the regulations and the parents who were also enforcing their own rules and regulations. So he said, in a very typical Western style, he first wanted to break away from the whole stifling, regulated environment that parents typically create for a child, of course, out of a lot of metta and compassion for the benefit of the child. But the child, it's very common for the child to feel stifled in it. So he said he first broke away from that, only to find that society had rules and regulations as well, and some of them were legal, and gets you into trouble when you break them, and the things that are not legal but which are expected also gets you into trouble when you don't comply, and his second rebellion was against that. And then once you break through that, there are yet other constraints of what is good for your body and your mind. And he discovered that through excessive consumption of alcohol, drugs, sensual pleasures of the flesh, that none of them gave him happiness. They only made him increasingly very, very unhappy, miserable, alienated, depressed, and so on. But he stuck with those because it was clearly breaking out of the parental regime and the society's regime, and he felt that was the way to be free. But he was very, very aware that he was not happy at all. And he was pursuing this, a solution, a real freedom, when he came on to Thailand and had heard about this monastery and came to spend a day or two to see what it is like. And he said for him, the biggest shock was there were Western people with robes who haven't had alcohol, drugs, and sex for a long time. And for him, he felt that was a stunning moment of realization, looking at them, and they were very cheerful and happy and pleasant. And he was like, my goodness, how is this possible? How can you not do those and be look so happy? And then he was introduced to Ajahn Chah. Before he was introduced to him, he was told that if you think we are not what you are usually used to, you should meet the master who is for 40 years is living a life of no alcohol, no drugs, and no sex. And he was like, oh my goodness, I can't believe that. And he expected to see a very unhappy person. That was his expectation, and instead he found what he calls the happiest man in the world, a person who was so free, and that freedom shone through a very happy person who was very cheerful. And he said for him, when he looked at the kind of self-regulation that Ajahn Chah does, 1 meal per day, very few hours of sleep, and that too sleeping not on a bed and a mattress, but on dried grass. And his list went on, and he was like, how can you have so severe restrictions externally and be so free internally? And he was hugely drawn onto this. Maybe this is the way. Maybe I had flipped it around, and I had constrained myself internally, and I was trying to find freedom externally through the things I did. And maybe that is why it was going so wrong. And maybe what is required is to completely flip it. And that is possibly why these people are so happy. And this young person who came to stay a day or two stayed on and became a monk and wrote this book, and we are so grateful. So one thing I do is when I come across something like this, I just check when was this written, just to see how long was this available in the world, and I didn't know about it. This was written in 2003, 20 years before, 20 years before. So that's amazing, isn't it? That's really amazing. And we should be so grateful that we are living in a time where these amazing things, the original Dhamma is known to us. So coming back, when we train ourselves to know the mind that knows, chitta, and the sense impressions, and to know the mind that knows it, the chitta, and to know the sense impressions that flow through it, this will help us to not get entangled in those sense impressions that flow through. We find refuge in the quality of stillness, silence, spaciousness, which is mind's own nature. This quality of non-interference allows everything because it is disturbed by nothing. It's a place that allows everything and is disturbed by nothing. This is a place of non-abiding. Isn't this absolutely amazing and beautiful? So how to practice? And this is why it becomes even more amazing, beautiful, and exciting. So the breath. The effort to make a clear distinction between the mind that knows and the mind objects is very important to our practice. Mindfulness of breathing is a good way to practice this. Just notice the feeling of the breath as you follow the sensation of it. Because how do we know we are breathing? Because of the sensation, the touch sensation that is flowing through, and the mind is observing. The breath is moving. And through the moving breath, we get the sensation of the breath moving, the sense impression. And that which knows that the breath is moving is not moving, the chitta or the awareness. A good place to start would be to catch the space at the end of the out breath. And I think this should mean at the beginning of the in breath. Yeah, sorry, this is a typo. So the place to know this awareness is at the end of the out breath and at the beginning of the in breath. Notice the pause and space there. As we extend the observation, we begin to notice that the spaciousness and the stillness is always there. As the breath flows in and out, there's an eternal spaciousness of the mind that remains unobstructed by the movement of the breath. So this is one way to practice. Ajahn Brahm once did a small example like this. So he said, okay, when you keep your attention on what you can hear, you can hear my words. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to deliberately pause between words and deliberately start increasing the pause between words. So you can see this space in between, this space where there's nothing. Okay, so let's try this. So now I am going to speak very slowly. So that you notice the silence and the stillness between the words. This space, stillness, silence is the chitta, pure awareness. All right. Okay. So the breathing thing is something like that. So when you start observing the breath, initially your mind is agitated. So it'll take time to settle down. But as you settle down in observing the breath and you really get into a nice, calm, still place of observing, you will be able to observe um, the breath coming in and the breath going out, the breath coming in and the breath going out. And in between, you can start to focus on the end of the breath coming in and the beginning of the breath going out, the beginning of the breath going out, sorry, the end of the breath going out and the beginning of the breath coming in, those spaces, and really see that still mind. And why are we practicing like this? So that we get the practice or the habit of being with that stillness and let flowing things to flow. And walking is another beautiful place you can do this. If you stand still, whether your eyes are open or not, doesn't matter. You can notice all the sensations of the body. So when you're standing still, your attention is on your feet, but you can feel the heaviness of your body on your feet. And if you are not having any slippers or shoes, so if you take me here, okay, so it's a tiled floor. It's the feeling of the tile feels cold today, and it feels hard as a tile surface usually is. And then when I can feel the weight, my entire body weight on my feet. And as I focus even more, I can feel the fleshy parts of my feet, feeling that weight. And there's a small curve, and in that curve of the foot, there's a place that doesn't touch the tiled floor. So I can feel that curve area as well because there's a little bit of air then in between. It feels different to the fleshy areas where the entire weight is pressed upon and so on. So you can really focus on the sensations you are feeling when you are standing. Now, once you establish it, then you can simply let the body start walking. As the body walks at a gentle pace, we see that even though the body is moving, the mind that knows the body is not moving. Now, I haven't tried this, so it looks beautiful on paper, and need to try it out and see what that is like. Movement does not apply to awareness. There is stillness, but there is flow. The body flow, perception flow, but there is stillness. As soon as the mind grabs it, we think we are going somewhere. And then the oil and water gets mixed up. There's a me going someplace. But at that moment, if you recognize, oh, look, the stillness of the mind is utterly unaffected by the movement of this body, then we know the quality of the stable flowing water. So that is the practice. The above is an appreciation of freedom. So I'd like to end this by saying that everything that is flowing, that is the non-self, because this whole awareness, from the time we wake up, we are aware there's an awareness. And that is what we identify with being the permanent entity, because this awareness was there from the time we were born. And we know this, so therefore we think that there was a permanent entity from the time we were born, but it's the awareness that was there, just the awareness. And we misunderstood this awareness as a permanent entity. So therefore we feel that the baby was me, the child was me, the teenager was me, the young adult was me, the middle-aged person is me, the person who is going towards elderly realm age is me, and the really old person is me. And that is how we occupy 80 or 100 years of time, just like that. And we occupy space. The body has a mass. It feels like a monolithic mass, because when you touch it, it feels like it's one single unit. When you think about it, it feels like one single unit. When you see yourself in the mirror, and when you see others who are like you, it looks one unit. So again, because the eye has its limitation, the eye can't show you that you're actually made of tiny particles, and these particles are rising, changing, and passing away at incredible speed, which your mind cannot comprehend. And therefore, like a mirage or like a ring of fire, it's illusionary. It's what you are seeing is not real. And you begin to realize that you can trust the sense doors, because the sense doors are hugely limited, and you need to break free from relying on the sense doors in order to see what is really going on. And that can only be done through your mind, because whatever the sense impressions are coming, you have constructed a story that there is me, there's myself, and I have this childhood, I had this past, I will be having this future, and thereby we are occupying time and space. And we don't occupy space just through our body, we occupy it through the whole feeling of mind. So I'm now in my house, which is in my garden, which is in my city that I live in, which is in my country, which is in my planet. And if you call yourself my universe, this planet is in my universe, you can occupy that entire space through your mind. So this whole freedom is in knowing that we have got confused, we have misunderstood it. There's only an experience from moment to moment, and one quality of the mind knows it. The other quality of the mind is that flowing nature of the experience, as the experience changes from moment to moment. And then we learn that the only refuge that is worth taking is in this knowing. Just know this and not engage, because what's the point? There's nothing to engage in here. Engagement only leads to confusion, alienation, a feeling of dissoluteness, a feeling of feeling miserable, and which is what was called suffering. And taking refuge in this stillness, in this silence, in this spaciousness, and just observing as things flow through, like the mirror that is unembellished, like the oil and water, which naturally separates if we let them. And that is the only refuge worth taking. And then the Buddha said, if you understand this, if you see this, you see me. So that's why we take refuge in the Buddha, because this is what he preached, the Dhamma, and of course the Sangha. is the reason why we understand this now. So we take refuge in the Buddha Dhamma Sangha. Taking refuge in the Buddha Dhamma Sangha is to do this, to take refuge in that stillness, that silence, that spaciousness, and observe things as they flow and not engage with it. And this is the place of non-abiding. So let me pause there, and before we move to the practice, let me take any questions, anything you need to clarify. Surumari, shall we start with you?
Yes, Akka, I like the analogies, and I think it makes sense as well. It's a nice way to kind of describe it. And I especially like the introduction of for example, the mind versus the mind objects idea, and then how we provide various analogies to describe that difference. I really like that as well. And I also really like, as Akka was saying earlier, within the mind chasing, what we do is we chase what we want and we run away from what we don't want. And that is essentially just a full-time job, when in reality, the easiest job of all is to not do any of this, and we will get what we want. But it's very hard to kind of do that and consider that. And what Akka described makes sense. I found that some of the analogies are more easy for me to identify with than some of the other analogies, but I believe the theory makes sense.
Fantastic. Thank you. And in the practice, did you have any questions? Do you think you can practice?
I believe I can, Akka. So the way I view it is, this is another way to view what we already have been discussing before in earlier classes. And so this is just there are multiple strategies we can use. This is another strategy.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well done. Because that is the plan. We can use the next 1 hour to practice this and see. Fantastic. Thank you for that. Samanthi, what are your thoughts, reflections?
Yeah. Amazing, Nadisha, amazing. The presentation was amazing, and it was quite different. I'm adding to what Izuru was telling, because we can add this. We can add this to what we have already practicing. So it will make simplified our methods of meditating. And I think we would be able to practice more in our practical life rather than sitting at one point. But we can be mindful on whatever we were doing, like in the office or in the household, doing things. I think it would be useful for us to practice more in our day-to-day life. And I like very much the example in the book that you said, the relating the mind to a pond in a forest. There are different kinds of creatures coming in. And if we are lucky and we are waiting for a longer time, we would observe the creatures that we have never come across. That's the reality of our mind, I think, because I'm beginning to understand, if I'm still and I'm observing my mind for a longer time, I will observe first the raga, dosha, moha, but in the meantime, I will be able to observe the little kleshas as well, differentiating them from the major kleshas. Thank you so much, Nadisha, for weaving this new kind of method of teaching. Amazed. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Samanthi. In fact, you're absolutely right. So yesterday after, I came across this book a couple of weeks ago as I was doing some 5S, shows the value of 5S. And I got hooked onto it, just seeing a couple of things. And then yesterday I actually had the time to sit down and read and make this note and share it as I promised the Bodhimagga group. And throughout the day, just 2 or 3 times I remembered, because what happens is we are creatures of habit. We forget to observe. And this is where the formal practice is required. So my first meditation teacher, Venerable Homagama Konnanya, who is also a student of Ajahn Chah, he told me, if you are really serious about progressing on this path, you must get into a daily practice of 1 hour in the morning and 1 hour in the evening at minimum. And he said that is something he recommends every lay person to do. And I do believe that is true, because without that, I am certainly not there in that practice. Without that kind of formal practice, yesterday, 3-4 times, I remembered that, oh, I'm mixing up the oil and the water. I need to let it naturally settle. I am mixing it up. Or sometimes I just remember, oh, something is flowing through and I am engaging with it. And that immediately helps to put things in context. And when the Buddha mentioned that this is something you need to practice as you are coming and going, as you are eating and drinking, as you are doing anything during the day, this is the practice. It now, as you realize it is something that we can indeed practice, but what happens is, will we remember to practice, right? And Ajahn Chah always says, you forget yourself and you go with the flow. As the mind is flowing, you flow with it, right? You forget that your only job in this life is to observe and not to flow with it. And I think this is why. So we are always looking for inspiration to help us to build a daily practice. And I think this is inspiration to do that, because doing that helps you to remember in your normal life to observe and not get carried away. And imagine the freedom you would have when you're working, when you're driving, when you're cooking at home, and when you're engaging with your lovely, beloved family, who probably causes the most of the shifting to happen. And the freedom that comes through it when you realize it's happening, and then you remember to be just observing and not to flow with it. So excellent. Let us, it's 10 o'clock now, so we can actually practice for an hour. So I will post the recording for the benefit of people who will listen late. Otherwise, they have just 1 hour of nothing, which is probably a good thing, but it may not work that way. So let me pause it, and then once we are done with the hour, let's have a quick discussion on how it is. So let us now start our practice. And what I would invite you to do is start with a bit of metta, and then get on to practicing this, what we discussed today. So I will pause now. So how was the meditation? Surmali, would you like to share first?
Yes, Saka. I was able to apply it in general, as my mind was wandering about meeting with some friends earlier today. I was able to kind of observe that even that thought itself is like a mind object that comes into play, and to try to distance myself from that thought. And I found it was helpful to be able to apply it as my mind naturally wanders. It was I considered it to be a tool or a newer visualization to observe and be aware of that already existing natural phenomenon, which is my mind wandering. So I liked being able to apply that.
Fantastic. Thank you. Samanthi, how was it for you?
Yeah, Nadesha, thank you so much. I started with Metta Bhavana today, and then went to do the Anapanasati. Was able to concentrate on the in-breath and the out-breath, and the position the breath touched for the first time. So that was amazing. It touched the tip of my nose. So after 30 minutes, I was standing like you said, and I was standing and focusing on my posture, standing still, and I focused on the feet and my weight on my feet and my weight on my knees and the area of the uh, bottom of my feet where the feet didn't touch the ground. And I was also feeling the air around that. And from that position, I started walking meditation. My mind played the monkey mind role. First, the thought went for Chanaki. I was wondering why Chanaki hasn't turned up these days. And I thought of giving a call and explaining the valuable method that you have explained these 2 weeks. Yes. And I was again coming back, but I tried to be still and try to not to distangle the oil and water, but it did happen. It did happen naturally, automatically. It tangled and it was messed up and mixed up. But anyway, thank you so much. I was able to know that it was mixed up in my day-to-day normal doing. I was always entangled with the water and the oil, but not knowingly. But this time, in this very 30 minutes, I was aware about that. Thank you so much. And most amazingly, Nadisha, at the end, my knee pain has gone. That's the fantastic part. Thank you so much, Terwan Saranai.
So great. Thank you for both of you sharing, and I hope this will inspire you to go for a daily practice. I have noticed that in the past, whenever I came across this awareness, the stillness and the silence of this awareness, I have felt uncomfortable. And there was a bit of a fear of it as well. And when I closely looked at it, it was, I think, not because of the pure awareness, but because a feeling of discomfort and a slight feeling of fear was already in there. And I was engaging with it, and I mistook that for awareness. And I think what I have probably done unconsciously all my life is to feel that, to distract myself from that feeling of discomfort and that slight fear of doing nothing with distractions. So, for example, watching a movie or reading or something to keep me distracted, because when I have nothing to do and when I come across that discomfort and that slight fear, I suppose you want to run away from it. So, and today I realized that that is something then I need to see as a sense impression. And there were moments when I was practicing observing the breath where I could settle into the knowing part or the quality of the mind and observe the flow. But that was a very brief moment. And yeah, I agree with both of you. It's something interesting to try out. So I hope you will use the next week and try to dedicate an hour in the morning and an hour in the evening. Now, this might be a big shift if you haven't done that before, but I think you now have some inclination that is going to help during the day to remember to observe. All right. So in that case, let us pass merit and close the program for today. So may all the merit of the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha, and everything we did today in this whole process, may all the merit that got accumulated be passed on to anyone seeking this merit, anyone who will benefit from this merit, and especially those people who have been dear to us, who have departed. If they are in need of this merit, may they certainly benefit from it. And may all of us benefit from this merit and continue to be inspired and encouraged by the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha to be in this path and to find this freedom, which ultimately leads to a happiness that we all would like to associate with. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May the Noble Triple Gem bless you all. Teravan Saranai.
There was
Teruvan saranai Nadisha. Teruvan saranai Isuru.
a